the middle of the whispering woods, four friends decided to temporarily leave their fast-paced lifestyle in a big city. In Democracy in America, again, similar sentiments were expressed. People wanted change, excitement, and some time in the natural environment. When it came to a place which had forbidden silence and creepy stories coming out of the woods, Whispering Woods appeared to be the right choice. It was around dusk when Mark, Sarah, Jake, and Emily got there. It was still a forest with huge trees densely situated. The tops of the trees were nearly reaching the sky. It was getting rather chilly now, and the girls felt a drop of tension that hung over them as they prepared for bed. The sun began to set, and it made shadows that elongated and observed as if they had a life of their own. Mark was a 28-year-old journalist currently working for a daily newspaper in the country. He was curious by nature and wanted always the truth. This rationalist was almost a skeptic regarding the supernatural, and he could explain everything from scientific angles. A 27-year-old history teacher liked ancient myths and legends. She was courageous and intelligent. She made rational decisions among the rest. Jake, who was 29 years old, was an ex-Marine. He took up the responsibility to be a force and a wall for the group. However, because of a spate of misfortunes in his formative years, he barely had a defenseless inside him. The youngest of the siblings, Emily, was 26 years old, and she worked as an artist. That is why such weak aspects as intuition and empathy became her strong points, but at the same time, the same weak points which exposed her to the miracles and supernatural. By the time they were secluding themselves around the fire, they were laughing and even telling many stories. Of course, something was lurking in the darkness watching the two people. Emily became all the more cold, and she sensed someone was behind her, but she overruled that feeling by attributing it to her imagination. As evening came and the darkness of night advanced, the great dense forest seemed to close in about them. Sarah, of course, being the ever-curious young woman, was eager to go to an abandoned cabin that she came across in her reading. This was Husky's sanity, at least according to the folklore said to hollow the cabin. Lester, Mike, and Mark found this story very interesting, and Mark conceded to the group's decision. Jake and Emily, who was still uncomfortable, joined in following it. The cabin was of a very poor structure and in a very dilapidated condition. The windows were shattered, the roof was caving in. Inside the room, the atmosphere was finally silent, though the air was dusty and filled with decay. Writings of some symbols were made on the walls, and there were photo frames with yellowing pictures on the floor. Emily had noticed that something was wrong, and she had got shiver down her spine, thinking that they were being spied on. Still, Mark attempted to put it into perspective. "It is just some shed," he said. "Well, there is nothing here." But weird symbols painted on the walls had a different story to tell. The majority of them were describing some sort of rituals, some evil things that had been done in ancient times. At night, Mark was awoken by a mumble outside the tent. He opened the door with a flashlight, and through it he watched shadowy figures moving among trees. He attempted to make himself believe that he was only imagining things, but the stoke of fear started rising in his heart. The next morning, they discovered that somebody inexplicably inscribed the same sort of markings as in the cabin around their campsite. Sarah underwent further hunting for facts about the forest's background in her attempt to make factual revelations. It was insightful when she found out that Whispering Woods was used for occasions such as the occult. The souls of the people killed remained restless, wandering in the forest for revenge. Supernatural incidents grew more severe, and protected feelings of Jake changed into stimulated. He met a spectral being indigenous to a soldier, reenacting a military conflict abuse. Because of the entity, Jake was guilty and scared, so the entity was able to control his thoughts. Thus, despite Emily's attempt to console him, the connection with the spirit intensified. The denial Mark started to experience was rather skeptical, as a few nights later he had terrible visions of being chased down. His rational brain was unable to comprehend, but the forest affected his willpower. He started developing some hallucinations. He saw people moving in shadows and looked around to see people watching him from the dark. The night came. Sarah, without any doubt of paranormal phenomena, guided the group to the place where the rituals were made. Pitted against the spirits, each character faces his fear. Mark fought to stay sane if the shadows of the trees were to call out and greet him by his name. Jake fought his apparition of the ghostly soldier. Sarah goes far and gets in deep trouble as she just cannot contain her curiosity and explore more of what the forest holds. Emily could nearly cry and see how angry and suffering the spirits are. Finally, when risking to get out of the house for some reason, they began to make gestures to the spirits in an attempt to find out what they are suffering from. The spirits in turn told them about their sorrowful history, demonstrating the vision of that ceremony and the sacrifices. Unexpectedly, the friends opened a small chance of satisfying them for a certain period, but Pesty wrote were not easily pacified. Finally, the night arrived, and as anyone knows, when there is no moon or any source of light, the forest eludes darkness at the break of dawn. The friends attempted to get out, but the spirits pursued them. They brushed sharp fingers against their skin, heard hisses in their ears, and saw glinting, red eyes in the dark. After a while, they were able to reach their campsite, physically battered, but thankfully they were still alive. As they packed up and prepared to leave, they found a note left by an unknown hand. Enjoy all our episodes one more time. You have had a glimpse of our WE, have had a glimpse of yours. This is not the finale. The friends went to Whispering Woods. They never remained the same again. After the events, they sought to go back to their regular lifestyle. However, the horror of that night followed them. Every time they shut their eyes, the whispering began, the eyes followed, and they always asked themselves if it was ever possible to flee. Mark, who once held that there was no such thing as the supernatural, now held a box. Not erase what he saw: the silhouettes that shifted when they were supposed to be still, the voices that said his name. He started his investigations in the paranormal, trying to get answers, but all he got were more questions. Mr. Walker, the history teacher, left home and joined the occult. Sarah, the cute, beautiful lady. She gathered books about rituals and dark magic to try to fathom what they had experienced. She had brought them into the forest through her curiosity, and now curiosity was eating her up. Another character who had issues with personal dilemmas was Jake, who was an ex-Marine among the hired personnel. The cold whisper of the soldier was still ringing in his head, nourishing the sin and terror. He went for therapy. He tried to recover, but the impact was immense. Emily, the artist, was the most affected. Her empath sight made her able to sense the pains and the anger that the spirits had. To try and understand what she felt, she began to paint unpleasant scenes of the forest and the spirits. But the more she painted, invoking the emotions that colored her canvas, the more she sensed them. The friends got to know each other and maintained a relationship with each other owing to their interaction. The two of them discussed what had happened that night in the forest and failed. They promised to never go back to Whispering Woods, but the forest remained in their thoughts. It started with a text message one strange night, 1 year after he had met her. It was a photo of the note they had found at the campsite. You have watched us. We have watched you. This is not the finish. Mark began to sweat as he glanced at the photo. He decided to call Sarah, Jake, and Emily, and they responded that they could get together. After they had all been summoned to his apartment, all of them were white-masked and fear-filled. What does it mean? Emily asked, fear in her voice. It means they are still observing, I added, still feeling touched by Sarah's fear and curiosity in her eyes. Jake frowned and his protective side came out. We must know who is behind this. This has got to stop. Mark respected the woman and nodded, but in his thoughts, he was rapidly taking all that he had seen and heard into consideration. I will trace the number. We will find out who is behind this. They spent the entire night studying, trying to find other details linking to the number and the spirits. While Sanderson continued typing, the room cooled down and they heard what sounded like whispers. The shades appeared to migrate on their own, and they always had the feeling that they were being followed. Then, out of the blue, blackout, the lights turned off. The lights went off and the group of whispering began with a clear intention of scaring this group of friends. They all gathered closely together with the feeling of awe in their chests. Feeling the panic rise in him, Mark shouted, "Who is it?" They suddenly felt a chill and felt a presence at the corner of the room, and there they saw a shadow. A figure moved closer and the audience saw a ghost-like looking man. It is the soldier that Jake met in the forest at the beginning of the film. "Why are you here?" Sarah shouted, fear, anger, and defiance in her tone, and was aimed at the ghost. What made the soldier seem rather sinister were his bright, violet eyes when he was speaking. "You shook our sleep. You watched what should not be witnessed. Therefore you are wanted." Emily began to cry, and she also felt a sensitivity as she became a soldier. "How could you assist in my process of searching for this one true direction and inner calm?" It seems that the soldier, who was slowly recovering from his injuries, had a hostile look on his face. The brute's notion of peace is to out, i.e., there is no peace for us but only vengeance. Just as expected, the lights came back on. The soldier who was with them disappeared from the scene. The people disappeared from the room, but the feeling of fear was still there. People understood that the spirits were still with them, observing and expecting something from them. They took their time in the following weeks searching for a way to get on the good side of the spirits. About this, they read books on ancient customs, turned to psychics, and paid attention to seances in an attempt to communicate with the spirits. But nothing worked. Despite all the efforts, the spirits did not leave and the haunting went on. One night Mark had a dream that was very clear and rather long. He was back in Whispering Woods, in front of the circle they had used as a stage for the rituals, in the middle of a rift valley. The spirits standing around him were furious and filled with sorrow in their gaze. Thus they slowly muttered, "You must return for that. You will have to go through all this ordeal, and then perhaps, only then, you will find the truth." He then woke up at 3:15 a.m. in cold sweats. He dialed the numbers of Sarah, Jake, and Emily and told them about the dream that he saw. Iraqi high-ranking officials understood what they had to do. They had to go back to Whispering Woods and face spirits one more time. Thus they had to gather their valuables and proceed towards the forest to continue their search. When they were about to get to the forest, Gay and Ulisha felt a drop in temperature, and that uncontrollable hush that was familiar to them descended on the place. Greg and Billy walked to the clearing where they had the previous meeting with the girls. Still, the symbols remained written into the trunks of the trees and the dust. The air was rigid, making them aware of being conspicuous and observed. Mark approached, and his tone while speaking was calm, yet fear was painted on his face. "We are here. We want to assist you to get that peace." The temperature drops and the darkness becomes the character of the show. The spirits emerged themselves in shapeless apparitions that floated in the air. The soldier moved forward and was clenching his fists in what could only be described as rage. "Sir, we are helpless," I told him. He replied angrily, "You can only join us." The spirits began to approach the friends, and the friends felt a cold shiver riding down their backs. They realized they were in great trouble, but they will not rest until they find a way to bring the spirits to their knees. Emily, fully understanding the girl's situation, raised her hand. "We're apologies for waking you up. Of course, could you let me know what I could do for you?" The contour of the soldier's face relaxed infinitesimally, and he directed his gaze at Emily. "Our pain is deep. Our souls, too, are confined in this forest, and they cannot leave and move on." Sarah could not remain silent. Her interest was roused, so she demanded, "What did you get yourself into?" "Why are you locked in?" The soldier's eyes teared up as he narrated the incident to the Avatar. Once people offered sacrifices to the ancient spirits controlling the forest, human sacrifices, as a matter of fact, and now we are those spirits eternally tortured prisoners. Thanking Mark, all traces of cynicism gone, he said. "How can we free you?" The soldier looked at Venigtov finally, and his eyes expressed optimism and hopelessness at the same time. "For you need to shed a light, for we are bound by the darkness of his life." the one of purity to cover our sin. The friends agreed in their minds to help the spirits of these people to find peace. They spent the night studying the scriptures that had been passed down over the generations and arranging the things they required for the ceremony. At dusk, they were silent and still in the clearing, waiting to demonstrate the rite. They said the words that were imprinted in every person's heart, loud and clear, full of energy of victory and new starts. The air got much colder and the spirits formed a circle around them and were observing them patiently. The moment they said the last words of the ritual, the area was illuminated with a bright light. The spirits rose and wailed, saying their goodbyes before turning to light forms. One more time he glanced at them, and his now bright eyes said, "Thank you." "Thank you," he mumbles and disappears into the light. The friends remained standing in the middle of the scene. The temperature was rising and there was some kind of serenity in the air. They knew that is when they managed to put the spirits to rest. Thus they got back to their campsite, content in their hearts. As they packed up and prepared to leave, they found one last note written in an elegant hand, while some of them said, "Shout for joy, daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king will come to you. He is righteous and bringing victory, lowly and riding on a donkey. Your king will answer you." Others said, "You have freed us. We are at peace." "Thank you." The friends got out of the whispering woods, feeling that they'd been differently touched. They knew they had done something something good that would remain with them for the rest of their lives. But the moment was buried in the consciousness, so that somewhere both the sisters understood that some things should remain untouched. More to it. Not all spirits could be reasoned with or be made to spare the souls of the living. There had been nothing as close as this, and for a moment it was so hard to differentiate between the living and the dead.